Time is Michael Spieker, who made a Hornbacher cheese in Switzerland. Judge Andy Johnson spoke about the winning entry.
Really catches your eyes. Had a great body and texture, but most importantly is the flavor.
54 judges went through more than 3,300 entries this week. Bruce Marcus for CBS News, Eagle River, Wisconsin.
Forbes out with its list of highest paid actors. Number one.
I just think Dua Lipa would make the party perfect.
You can have a ball pit.
Adam Sandler, who made $73 million from his Netflix projects in 2023. Number two.
Hi, Barb.
The Woman in Pink.
Hi, Barbie. Hi, Barbie.
Margot Robbie at $59 million, thanks to her movie. Deborah Rodriguez, CBS News.
WPTV's First Alert Weather on WPSL is brought to you by Seacoast Air Conditioning, online at seacoastair.com. Now with a look at our forecast, here's meteorologist Jennifer Correa.
This afternoon, very warm. Some spots, in fact, could get close to a high of 85. And it's only going to get warmer as we go into the weekend with highs, sure enough, in the mid to upper 80s both Saturday and Sunday. All right, for later this evening, watch out for just a passing shower, maybe an inland thunderstorm. Otherwise, rain chances pretty low for today. Low again for Saturday, but we got the chance for thunderstorms late in the afternoon Sunday. I'm WPTV First Alert meteorologist Jennifer Correa for WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
Living in Florida is paradise until your AC breaks down. Seacoast Air Conditioning is family owned and operated for over 40 years. Seacoast Air Conditioning offers service in hours, not days. We answer the phones, show up on time, and fix the problem right the first time.
Comfort crisis, don't roast, call Seacoast.
Hi, this is Rabbi Shafir Loeb, inviting you to join us at Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. We are inclusive, we are welcoming, we are all things Jewish on the Treasure Coast. We have Kabbalat Shabbat services at Friday evenings at 7:30 p.m. Our sanctuary is at 295 Northwest Prima Vista Boulevard at the corner of Irving in St. Andrews Community Center. Please join us there any Friday. On third Fridays, we have a Shabbat dinner at 6:15 p.m. Reservations can be made at our website, www.eitzchayim.org. You can stay up to date with us at our website or on Facebook. Lots of different ways to check in with Congregation Eitz Chayim. Again, a welcoming, inclusive Jewish home on the Treasure Coast, just for you to join us and enjoy your Jewishness and renew your inner Jew at Congregation Eitz Chayim.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
It's 10:07 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. You're on Ask a Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Loeb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. And it is a warm, it's like almost feels like summer out there today. Nice.
Yeah, where did spring go?
Well, it never comes to Florida. It never comes to Florida.
Oh boy! Wow. Yeah. It's going to be a warm. It's going to be a real warm weekend.
Yeah, it goes from cold to hot here. It just does.
Oh yeah.
And I realize that Northerners don't think of our winters as cold, but I am so Floridian already.
You shot a gorgeous picture.
Oh, the saguaro?
Of the saguaro cactus.
Yeah.
That thing is doing great.
It is. It's very happy. Just sitting in my backyard. Two of them.
Shocked.
There's actually two of them.
That's one shocked that it can handle the humidity.
They don't mind the humidity as long as they have drainage. So if you put them in a pot, so those pots, which you can't tell, is they're sitting on egg crates.
Oh.
So that the water doesn't sit and rot their toes.
Okay.
That's what they don't like. They don't like to rot their toes. And that's why they do so well in Tucson, because of course with the sand,
sure,
there's perfect drainage.
Nothing stays.
Nothing stays.
Yeah.
And so they drink simply what, as the water, as it goes, percolates down through their roots, they grab enough and they puff up and look like this stuffed accordion thing.
Well, yeah, that was beautiful.
Yeah, that just happened to be it was a great shot.
Yeah.
And that's my two babies sitting there.
Nice.
And
Nice. Yeah.
Actually, I need to go and clean the tree pollen off of them.
Oh, God, the yellow stuff.
Yeah, they're a little bit yellow right now, so I'm going to hose them down.
It's also all over your car, I'm sure.
Well, that's yeah.
Yeah, that's the other.
That goes
given.
without saying.
That's the other given. Yeah, I get it. Wow.
And, yeah, and the birds, of course, are putting yellow stains on cars at this time too, because they're eating the pollen. And we start off with a caller on Ask a Rabbi. This is Jerry in Port St. Lucie. Oh, I got to put on the headset so I can hear you, Jerry. Good. Hammurabi? I'm not. Yeah. Absolutely, you can listen off air. So his question, for those who are not on, not on Facebook, not on the radio, not live, was about the Hammurabi Code. And that's a famous example of, and the big thing that it's known for is actually its retribution, right? It's known as a lex talionis, which means that it tells you that you punish people accordingly to the crime that they've done. And it's very specific. It says, if they have poked out your eye, you run around and poke out their eyes. And I'm looking right now, admittedly, on Dr. Google, and Dr. Google says that there's 282 codes. And right, so
I've never heard of that.
The Hammurabi Code. It was around. Scholars believe that it was around 1700 years before Jesus, so before the Common Era.
Shortly before I was born.
Shortly before you were born, yes. Right when the dinosaurs came out. And of course, there are some similarities between it and the laws in Torah, which are dated probably pretty close in time, actually. Certainly Moses is well before that, because David is estimated to be about 12 to 1500. So we're talking about the same basic time. So clearly people are starting to ask the question, how ought we to live? And the other thing that's happening is people are starting to write things down. We're starting to see alphabets and that kind of coding. And the early coding, of course, looks a lot like pictograms.
I was going to say like cave drawings types.
Well, this is after cave drawings, but the beginnings of alphabet. And alphabet is typically attributed to the Phoenicians, which of course is Lebanon. That's that area. And so we are talking about things that are happening in the Middle East and further east. And my belief is that and there's many reasons that I've given over past shows, that there's definitely some traveling going on between China and probably Egypt. And Jerry was right. Mesopotamia, that area is Iran, Iraq. Baghdad is Babylon. Bavel is Baghdad.
Oh, okay.
So that'll give you some anchoring. So the generally believed route that Abraham takes is from Ur of the Chaldees, which is probably somewhere in one of the stands, coming down across through Mesopotamia and then hooking a left and going down into Laban's town, Laban, hear it, and coming then and leaving that and going south and coming into the land of Canaan or Canaan.
Wow.
So
Okay.
it is all connected, and I'm sure the
That's
people
your
are
Silk Road again.
yeah, it's the Silk Road, and it's definitely there's a need for some sense of justice going on. And the question is, what do you do? How do you there's two issues involved when somebody commits a crime or a harm. And before we even get into whether they intended to or not, how do you make someone whole? I think that's the bigger question. When you're damaged, how are you made whole? Who's responsible for healing, reparations, and retribution? So we're seeing the beginning of tort law. And by the time it gets to Torah, it's not what Hammurabi says, which is interesting, right? Hammurabi says if somebody pokes out your eye, you go and poke his eye back. You make you even, but then neither of you are whole, and that's part of the problem. And Torah takes a slightly different. It does have the eye for an eye, but what you have to realize that that's a limit, no more than an eye for an eye. Right, or a tooth for a tooth. In fact, it goes on to say if a master knocks out the teeth of a slave or pokes out their eye, that they are then set free because the damage to them is so great that you have to release them from their servitude.
Wow.
And we're not talking about the kind of slavery that Africans suffered in the Middle Passage. We're not talking about yanking people out of their homes and taking them to Europe and to South America and a little bit to North America, certainly to the Caribbean and all of those areas. We don't realize, but America actually, mind you, it doesn't make it okay. America did not get the bulk of the slaves. The bulk of the slaves went to South America and to the Caribbean.
Yeah, well, I bet.
Yeah, and probably not because there wasn't a market, but because they were already sold off from the ships by then.
Well, and you figure Columbus got here by mistake.
Columbus actually never made it to America. That's, there's so much.
Oh, wait a minute. Uh-oh.
Columbus never made it to America. He made it to places like Hispaniola, where he totally killed off the native population.
Oh. Okay.
Because he thought he had landed in India and had access to all the gold, and he was going to force the natives to bring gold. And how much gold is there in Hispaniola?
So he was in the DR then, huh?
He was in the DR. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, he was down south, and he actually never made it to America. The story that he discovered America was actually a reshaping, a slight spin on history. And part of that was an effort by Italian immigrants to say that Italians discovered America.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
To improve the lot, because very often when immigrants first come to America, we've done it enough times over the 200 and some years of our existence. We know this. When immigrants come to America, they are typically subject to abuse and discrimination. They typically do better than the average American population. So immigrating Italians tended to get college degrees, tended to do very well. And we're not talking about, and yes, there are criminal elements within every culture, folks. There just is. And yes, I'm not shading the mafia light. That's definitely brutal and very criminal. But when Italian immigrants, for the most part, come, they want to do well. When people uproot themselves and their families, think about this a moment, folks. They're coming because they're ambitious or because they're desperate, both of which mean they want a better life. And so when they come to a new place, there are several things they want. They want to hold on to what they consider valuable and treasureful in their old culture. And they also want to assimilate. They want to become part of the new group. They want to belong, and they also want to excel. They want to do all those things. And it causes a tremendous amount of strife, but typically immigrants do very well. Give them a couple of generations, and the motivation to do that well is dissipated. And so they become part of the average American whatever over a couple of generations. So we're seeing that wave now with the immigrants that we're getting from Asia and from the Middle East. And there's that desire to both fit in and to do better than the average, just to show that you can, that you're not deserving of the abuse that you as a people get.
So you're saying that the New York Columbus Day Parade should be moved to Santo Domingo?
I'm saying that the New York Columbus Day Parade should be dropped. Yeah, it's.
Oh.
I'm sorry. It's not. He was a very cruel.
Yeah.
He was despicable, and he really is not worthy of praise.
Isn't it amazing how things are spun?
It's definitely spun.
Years?
And it wasn't spun for his benefit, because obviously he was long gone by then. It was spun for identity, the need to feel that you're a contributor, that you're significant. And it's the need to have basic common respect. So that plays into that.
Well, and you've got all of the explorers, if you will, and you can throw the lovely Jesuit priests into that mix, on how they treated the folks who were already here.
Yeah, the story of the indigenous peoples of North, Central, and South America and the missionaries, the conquistadors, is just, you want to cry. If you really look at the history, I have actually cried when I've done it. And they enslaved the indigenous population to build those beautiful missionary missions, and the one in Tucson that's very famous,
Santa Vera.
Yeah, thank you. Built by slaves, by indigenous enslaved people. And if it's kind of interesting, because yesterday in my class at Kaiser, we got into a discussion that's kind of worthless, really, but it was who has suffered the most in discrimination. And
oh boy,
that's not even a valid discussion point, because I always think of Schwarzkopf, and one mine makes it intense. There is no justification for any slavery, period.
No.
Not in antiquity, not in Egypt, not off of Africa, not for the Mayans, not for sex traffickers and the Florida Shuffle. I don't care where it is. It's not okay. It's not okay. Yeah, we're wearing clothes, most of us, that probably are made by slaves, because we don't have a good way of checking in on that.
In a third world country.
In a third world country. When we offshored it, yes, we saved money, but we put slaves at great risk. And when we allow, that's the danger of quote unquote free enterprise. It's not free for the slaves. It's just not free. And I know that in the discussion that we were having in the class, that the student who was going through this, who suffered the most, and it was an interesting shading and spin on history that was being spewed. But aside from that, which it blows my mind to even try to think of who has suffered the most, because none of us really, Fox News and MSNBC weren't there to video the whole thing, and we don't begin to have an unbiased rendition of it. And yes, there are still people who are abjectly poor in America and certainly elsewhere. And there's a prayer that we say in my congregation that we say at the High Holy Days in particular. And it says, there are people who are starving in lands too near and too far away to name. And we need to remember that it is near, that it's not that far away. I know the first time that I drove through the reservations in Arizona, I was struck by the abject poverty that I saw in sections of that reservation.
Oh, yeah.
And kudos to the Seminole tribe of Florida that they have pulled themselves up and are doing much better. They still have many problems, but they're, thank you, Hard Rock Cafe and that franchise. That is, Chief Billy is just, what he did for the Seminole tribe.
They're doing a great job.
Is beyond words, and I wish that all indigenous people to Americas could benefit from that. And slowly they are, because that franchise is moving to different tribes, and they're targeting the tribes to help bring them up. But I also know there's corruption in some tribes, and it's not always trickling down. So there's many, many problems. And I think that getting back to the Code of Hammurabi, that was a beginning of trying to address what is fair. And the problem with, if somebody poked out your eye, poke out their eye, is then you have a blind population. Because what if everybody says, well, Sammy did that to you, and you go and poke out Sammy's eyes, but it really wasn't Sammy, it was Joey. So now Sammy goes and pokes out Joey's eye, and it migrates. Because when punishments are too severe, then avoiding punishment or getting retribution becomes the guiding light and not the morality behind it. And so the object still is, how do we make people whole? How do we help restore human dignity? How do we ensure that the vast, vast, vast majority of human beings on this planet have minimum food that they need, at least basic food, basic medical, and dang it, give them a decent education, and teach them that aggression is not the answer. We do not need to live in a world of bullies. We just don't.
All right, let's get back to this class again. I love this possible discussion here.
Oh,
where did this student take this thing?
Oh, he was deciding who had suffered the most, and it was such a non sequitur that candidly I changed the subject in the class. I intervened at that point and said, no, we're done with this topic. Because
really? Okay.
Oh yeah, it spewed many of the standard stereotypes of various things, and we're just not going to go there.
Okay, yeah.
Stereotypes help to some degree, but they also are very harmful, because when people invoke stereotypes, they truly never realize the reality. And so, for example, one of the stereotypes that came up was all Jews are rich. Well, I don't know. Look at my bank account. I'm not that rich. And if I were rich, I wouldn't be working all of these jobs, folks.
I get it. No.
Yeah. And I wouldn't be still trying to better my situation. So let's be real. But there, certainly there are rich Jews. There are also Jews that are on and need to be on assistance. So Jews are just like everybody else. They span They span everything. They have the same averages of everything. That's another myth, is Jews are not alcoholics. Well, baloney. 10 to 15% statistically of Jews are alcoholics. It's what is.
How's that possible with Manischewitz? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I think they go to probably vodka for the most part, because they think it doesn't smell. It does at a certain point.
Oh yeah, are you kidding? Yeah.
Well, that's another one of those lies. Vodka doesn't
comes through your pores.
Yeah, and you start to smell like wood alcohol.
Yes, you do. Yep.
Yeah.
That's when my late father tried to con my mother. Oh, I'm not drinking anymore. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then how come you smell like a brewery?
Yeah. Or
a distillery.
And it was vodka. Yeah.
Well, that's a common misperception, right? That vodka doesn't. It may not be on your breath as much, but you definitely smell pickled.
Yeah.
And yeah. 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 Sometimes when I was younger, I used to wonder why some people smelled like they'd been playing with airplane glue, which has a similar smell. Yeah, when people, as you said, it comes through the pores.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what were you doing out in the garage?
Well, and you know what? Some of my buddies that were really into like making surfboards and stuff like that
Got high on the paint.
Oh my! Well, but it was on their clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the turpentine and.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All that good stuff.
It's like this could be the middle of the week, and they may not have touched any equipment for 3 or 4 days, but
it's still there.
Still there. You bet.
Yeah. Yeah. It lingers on. Some smells linger on clothes.
Yeah.
And we are an interesting, smelly bunch of creatures. So yeah, so stereotypes are, it's a good stereotype to say that birds have 2 wings, because most birds do, and when you see one with 1 wing, you know something's wrong. But when we start assigning some of these other things, they're not nearly so accurate. And stereotypes, unfortunately, the problem with stereotypes is that they have a use, but if we fail to look at the person in front of us as a person, or the dog as a dog, or the bird as a bird, then we fail as human beings to look at each other. And
you mentioned the birds. We had a situation on I-95. Traffic is stopped by the highway patrol.
Okay.
And it was the largest
group of cranes,
sandhill crane family I have ever seen, traveling from the southbound lanes over to the northbound lanes.
Oh, good.
And beyond. And the highway patrol had everything shut down
to let the cranes
both directions. I had never seen that. I thought it was great.
So yeah, I think that is. But how did the highway patrol know to?
I have no clue.
To do that.
I have no clue.
And I have actually seen. I saw that on Village Parkway. There was a group of cranes coming down, and this truck was coming. It was behind me, and the cranes actually hustled their little tails off the road. They can fly. They can scramble pretty impressively, but it also reminds me of the cartoons when they're trying to get all their feathers and wings.
Oh yeah, sure,
in the right place.
Sure.
I love those cranes. They are. I think
I
they
do
are cool.
too. Oh,
I love photographing them, and I love watching them. We used to actually go in Tucson to Whitewater, where you could see the cranes in their migration. We used to watch them take off and land.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
there. We had one, and we've got like a little patio that looks out onto the street, and these cranes, all of a sudden, and there were like 4 of them, just all of a sudden, my wife and I were sitting in the patio, and they just sat there, and they looked at us. So I'm sitting there talking to these cranes, and they're just standing there watching.
Yeah.
And then they moved on, but it's so funny. They're so majestic looking.
They are. I've actually had a couple of them in my backyard, which surprises me that they come in over the fence and land, because we've got privacy fence around the yard. In the front yard, quite often they're walking around. There's a family that lives in our allotment, so we see them from time to time. And their babies.
In like the one that on 95, there must have been 8 or 9 babies that they were there. It was incredible. But it's what amazes me, and Ken Joeli was here from the county talking about the family aspect of those cranes, because they're partners. They are, mom and dad are like forever, unless something happens. But yeah, it's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, so it is surprising what they can do and what they can be. So, okay, Facebook is being a little bit of a pain.
Oh, well,
It does that every once in a while.
Is it crashing like it did the
No,
other day?
it's not crashing. It's just,
Boy, that was serious.
yeah, that was a serious crash. And Sharon is sharing that she has a story about a golden eagle and the cranes at Whitewater. So we'll have to hear about that later. Yeah. So,
Golden eagle. I don't think I've ever seen one. I've seen pictures, but
yeah, sometimes I can remember one of my fondest memories of my father. The last summer he was alive, we were coming back to where we lived in Pennsylvania from Ohio, from Cincinnati. We were coming across I-70, and there's a big ravine with a huge, beautiful bridge, and my father pulled off into, there was a little scenic view area, and he, all of a sudden, he'd been talking about something, and then he just pulled off in there, and we spent 45 minutes watching an eagle training its young to fly.
Oh, wow.
Because, we don't think of it very often,
cool.
but sparrows and stuff, they learn to fly on their way down from the nest, where they hop around on the ground for a while until they get it together. But eagles and large birds have to learn to fly. They have to develop the muscles. It's just not automatic for them.
And of course, they're much larger.
They're much larger. And so what this eagle was doing was the babies were hooked up on the talons on both wings. There were a pair of babies. And the eagle would shake, I'm assuming it was mom, but it could have been dad because both parents participate in the training, but shakes the wing and the baby falls down and flaps for a little while. And then the parent swoops underneath and picks them up so they can land on their shoulder again. And then the other wing would flap and the baby would fall and flap around for a little while and get picked up. And so that way they were developing their muscles and learning how to fly. And Sharon shares that parrots are in that group too. They have to learn to fly. Large birds.
I didn't know parrots were like that. Wow.
Anything large, the muscles have to develop enough to actually support the bird.
Wow.
We don't, we might not think about that. That's not so true with it, as I said, the tiny little sparrow or wren, because there's not a whole lot of muscle there. And it's much easier for them to fly because the wing to body to weight ratio is in favor of flying. For the bigger birds, not so much, which is why you don't see emus flying. They've exceeded, and that's why you see them. The wings are no longer as valuable to them as they are. And eagles and ospreys and cranes are among the bigger birds. And Sharon likes to watch the eagle cams throughout.
Those are cool.
They are cool.
Yeah.
And I know that people cry that they eat rabbits and things like that, but they've got to eat too, folks. And we kill lots of baby animals in our food process.
Well, and you know what we're starting to see a little bit in St. Lucie West are little bunnies again.
Yeah, it's that time of year. That's why Easter bunnies, folks, and Easter eggs, chickens will start laying their eggs soon. Yeah, there's nothing in the Jesus story about bunnies and eggs, folks. Yeah. What can I say?
Everything has a season.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. To everything a season.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ecclesiastes.
Yep.
It's a beautiful, and you and I.
Turn.
Yeah, turn. That's what exactly what I was saying. The birds.
Yeah.
They did a beautiful job of that.
They did. That was an amazing song.
Yeah. And I if you haven't heard that, folks, go on YouTube and listen to it. The birds turn. To everything there is a season. They did just a beautiful job of that.
I've never heard of the rock group Ecclesiastics, so. Was that before Michael Jackson?
All right. Down, boy.
I'm sorry. How to destroy a show.
Right. So, getting back to it, I think that probably one of the saddest comments that I heard, that was part of the address last night, was the idea that democracy is attacked And I think it's important to understand, first of all, what do we mean by democracy? Because America's not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic, folks, and look it up. We are. We are not a democracy. And, I don't know of anybody who's a democracy since Athens, actually. And Athens, everybody, but even that really wasn't a full democracy in that you had to be a citizen to have a vote. And slaves, of course, didn't have a vote. Yeah. So even if we look at that example, but a true democracy, you have to vote on everything. And the problem with that, and part of the reason why the founding fathers of America didn't go for that model, is that it both bogs a nation down for everybody to vote on everything, because everybody's not knowledgeable about everything. And the idea was that we would elect representatives, senators and congressmen, and we would set up a set of checks and balances, because our founding fathers and their wives understood that the temptation of power leads to imbalances and unfairness and bullying, because they saw it coming out of England toward the colonies. That colonial attitude that colonies are only there to serve the empire it's not a healthy way for people to live. But even so, the American Revolution, folks, was the rich folks complaining because they're the ones who got taxed. It wasn't the average person who had to worry about paying taxes on things. So there's lots of stuff like that we really do need to look at. Religious leaders were all wealthy because only the wealthy have the time to sit back and reflect on life and get to that place.
Ooh.
You have to be. The person who's working for their living and scrambling to get food on the table doesn't have the time to be called by God. It just doesn't happen. It has to be somebody who has idle time, who can take up a ministry, who can go and teach, who can go and model behavior. The Buddha comes right out of a rich Kshatriyan family.
Really?
Jesus comes out of a wealthy carpenter family.
Yeah.
People don't realize carpenter is not a poor family. You've got to have tools, and tools are never cheap, especially not then. They're not cheap now. Try going to Sears or to any of the tool companies, and you'll find out tools are not cheap. A mechanic is judged by how many tools he has or she has in the box. And that's true with counselors. How many tools, how much training have you been able to get? We do that throughout society. And even education costs something. Even training, learning how to do something costs something. You have to pay in one way or another for all of these things. And yeah. So I guess in some ways the fact that I have this huge student debt that I will probably be paying the rest of my life.
You mean Joe Biden hasn't forgiven
He has not forgiven my debt.
Oh.
When he came out and said, "Oh, we'll forgive 10,000," I'm like, okay, and what about the other 200,000?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a slight exaggeration, but
no,
there are people with $200,000 worth of student debt.
Most doctors.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I was talking to an orthopedic surgeon. He says, "Yeah, I'll be working 20 years to pay off my student debt."
Yeah. Well, the fact that I think they give you either 20 or 30 years. I confess it in the moment. I'm forgetting it. And so here's my advice to people. Continue to take a course, because as long as you're in school, the student debt is somewhere in the past, or not in the past, but it's suspended.
Oh, I did not know that.
That's the best way to not have to pay it back, is to keep taking classes. So it's not just about wanting to learn, it's also
although that's part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is some of that. And that is part of life. So the bottom line, we tend not to think of our our own history as being a gift, but our own history, what we identify with, helps us satisfy some basic human needs. So why do people talk about things like that? Because that helps people have a sense of belonging, one of the basic needs. It also gives people a sense of significance. What makes them unique and different is the generational stuff that happens to our ethnicities. And when we acknowledge that in each other and not just think that we're the only ones that have gone through that, then I think we help humanity as a whole. And I think that's very important. We need to do that. We need to do things that help people recognize that we are all on this boat and none of us has the right to drill a hole under our seat. It might be your seat, but it's not your boat. It's humanity's boat.
Yeah.
That's the best, one of the best ways I can think of something collective. You don't have a right to drill a hole under your seat on a boat. You just don't. Even if you own the boat, as long as there's one other person on that boat with you, you don't have that right. We do not control and should not control the lives of other human beings. That's just, that to me is against the purpose of life, if you will. Certainly, if we go into a God-fearing sense, that's against God. And I don't care what religion you are. Self-defense, that's obviously a very different issue. Yes, you have a right to defend yourself. But interestingly, Judaism takes the tack that if somebody says to you, do this or I'll kill you, then you have to accept being killed. Because it's not okay to use that as an excuse to kill another person. So there are things that you are not allowed to do, even at the pain of death. There are things for which you are expected to submit and recognize that life is not a guarantee. Life is a gift, and we need to treasure it every day. And we need to treasure the lives of our neighbors.
Cool. I won't even bring up the Israeli thing now.
No, we won't go there, because there's so much.
A mess.
There is so much garbage on so many levels, in so many ways, and
you know, Hamas is probably stealing some of that aid.
I'm sure. Hamas is victimizing and abusing the Gazans. Absolutely. And are we seeing Stockholm Syndrome? Yes, we are. I'm sure there's some of that going on. And there's also people who are resisting it. We saw that with Germany. When bullies come in, the average person is not in a position to say, well, I'm going to stop this. It typically takes, bullies often require, what do we tell our kids when there's a bully? Go get a teacher, go get an administrator, go get somebody bigger who can step in. And that's not happening in Israel. We've got fighting that's going on that is just beyond over the top on so many levels. We have leaders on both organizations who are not looking out for their people. And that's as candidly as I'll put it. The UN found examples of rape and that kind of horrendous. That's not war. That's not resistance, folks.
Right.
That's bullying and mobbing. It's gang activities.
Yeah, it's gang warfare, basically.
It's gang warfare. And, Hamas is a gang. There's no question. But what do you do with a gang? Because a gang has bullies and they do have slaves. They have slaves. The average Gazan is basically a slave. They're captive inside the group. And yes, it's hard to sort that through. It's hard to tell by looking at somebody who and what they are. And so we need to get smarter and better at figuring that out. And we need to give people a better opportunity. We need to get in and educate children, but not the way that America stole the indigenous children away from their parents. It has to be done with dignity. It has to be done with a recognition. We can't rob somebody of that identity because it's going to take away their sense of belonging. It's going to unhinge them, and it's going to give them nothing to lose.
And oh, by the way, you need to forget about your past.
Well, we need to recouch the narratives. Right now, the narratives in the Middle East are mutually exclusive and so far afield from what really happened in history. And that's true on all sides. The narratives are just over the wall. And as long as we continue to, there's brainwashing on all sides, if you want to use it as that phrase, but it's not conditional kind of that sort of stuff. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And I don't pretend to have all the answers, nor am I in a position to espouse them or enforce them, even if I could espouse them.
I just hope they get the hostages out.
And anybody who thinks that asking for the hostages to be released is wrong is just inhumane. Just as it's important right now to get food to the children of Gaza.
Sure.
We need to. We can talk about the adults and who is and who isn't a sympathizer. That's a really hard one to sort out. And maybe we can. I think that a group of psychologists could go in and figure out who's what and figure things out, but I don't see that happening. So it's an academic exercise at this point.
Well, and what do they do about education?
Well, education is a mess. And education is, there's not enough educated people on all sides of this equation. Unfortunately, for the most part, in a lot of the world and in parts of America, kids get minimal education. They're not really educated, but their brains become rigid and locked at a very young age. And so they aren't as open to scientific information as they need to be. We need to operate on facts, folks. That's not weakness. That's a strength. And strength is not, can I punch you out? That's bully tactics. Strength is, can I win the hearts of people on facts? Can I lead the people to a better place? One of the questions that I often ask my classes was Hitler good for Germany? And some people will say initially, but the answer is no, not even. Right? Yes, what he did was legal because he made the laws, folks. He subverted the then German legislature into his bidding, but they were on rations almost immediately within months. So no, it wasn't even good for Germany. He started stealing the resources of the population to build his machine. He was definitely a dictator. He and his cronies definitely subverted the German population, the Weimar Republic. Did it have its problems? Yes, it did. And there was a perfect storm, if you will, that allowed him to come to power. His party never got more than 30%. But it had to do with how the government was done and who died and who burned which buildings and mob think that they were really good at manipulating. They were really, really good at that. And it's a challenging set of questions. So I'll flip to my philosophy class at IRSC. We were talking in the last class with that group about animal rights. What rights do animals have? Are animals, how sentient are animals? And so we showed, there's a dog named Chaser who died just recently. His companion, for lack of a better word, Dr. Pilley, who trained Chaser. Chaser had over 1,000 nouns in his vocabulary. He had multiple verbs. He did a variety of different tasks, and he interacted with Dr. Pilley a lot. Pilley said that he's about the level of a 7-year-old. No, I'm sorry, about 2-year-old, I think he said.
What? Yeah, I think 60 Minutes.
Yeah, 60 Minutes did
a story. That dog was amazing.
You can look at Chaser. Yeah, he is amazing. And then some scientists have actually administered some cognitive tests to him. And because there's multiple kinds of
Wait a minute.
intelligence.
Cognitive tests for a
Cognitives
dog?
for a dog, you can do that. You set up different tests and you see what the dog does. So, for example, one of the things that dogs do that we don't think about is that you can give them hand signals. So if they respond to hand signals, that's language and it's inference. So, for example, if you hide a treat under 3 cups and you point to the one that has the treat, the dog will look there first, usually. Right? And parrots, Sharon says parrots, you're right. Parrots and corvids have very high intelligence in the bird world. It's crows that have a 7-year-old intelligence. Crows will go from one room where they're being tested. They're presented with puzzles, and they can see inside the puzzles where the treat they want is. And then they're taken into another room that has tools. And they will forego the treat that's in that room because the treat in the first room is better. It's what they really want. They will grab the tool they need, take it back with them into the other room, and open the puzzle to get the treat they want. They'll select the correct tool from several.
Wow.
So they'll have like 3 puzzles with 3 different treats in them. They'll take them into this other room that'll have like 8 different tools, only 3 of which apply to the 3 in the other room, and one of them has a treat. And they are not distracted. They will pick the correct tool and take it back with them and open the puzzle box.
Wow.
And yeah, and you can watch this being recorded and shown. So we're talking about levels of intelligence that most of us don't think that they have. And I liken it to, there was a dog named Terry that we used to have. And she was a master at opening her crate. We used to crate the dogs before we left for work back when we lived in Ohio. And it had a spring latch on her crate. She could open that. She knew how to jiggle it so that it opened. So then we took it and we put a clamp on it. She figured out how to get the clamp off. And then we took a bungee and wrapped it around. She figured out how to get that off. And I used to imagine it taking her all day to unravel this.
And yeah.
And there was one day where we left for work and we had gotten like 2 or 3 blocks away from the house, not very far. And I realized I'd forgotten something important at home. And we turned back around and I went in and she was already sitting on her bed outside the cage. So that was the last time we crated her. She didn't do any damage in the house.
Uh-huh.
She just wanted to sit on her outside bed.
Yeah.
And I'm pleased that she didn't teach the other dogs how to do it, because they will. They teach their young. We watched, back then we lived in a 2-story house, and the adults teach the babies how to go up and down stairs, and they do it much more more basic. And Sharon is talking about a cockatoo that she had that could open a combination lock.
Oh, come on, Sharon.
Learned the combination.
No.
They are much brighter than we give them credit for. And the question then becomes, if we say, well, it's a function of intelligence, so we say that the bird is a 7-year-old. Well, what do we do with a human being who is developmentally impaired and can't get beyond a 5th grade level or a 5-year-old level or any of those, right? They're still human beings. And we need to start treating the planet like everything that lives on it has merit, including those rotten mosquitoes. Because without them, the dragonflies that I love wouldn't have food. I don't like that either, but we got to figure out how to balance it all.
I really dislike mosquitoes.
I know, so do I. On that note, life is an interesting balance, and we really do need things that we don't think we do because it's part of the overall puzzle. But we do need to find a way to treat each other and everyone else with dignity. That's really the only way that we're going to progress in the world, or we'll keep repeating the mistakes. We see that over and over and over again if we look through history. But you have to study history to know it. And you have to study science to understand the world. We do need to be educated, folks. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb of Congregation Eitz Chayim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast.
So how do we find you?
We at 295 Northwest Prima Vista Boulevard at the corner of Irving in the community center of St. Andrew's St. Andrew's Lutheran Church, rather. We are in the first building off of Irving in the community center at 7:30 on Friday nights.
All right. And see, you don't really have any major holidays.
Purim is coming up very soon, and shortly thereafter Passover, and we will have a Seder first night at St. Andrews. Will be in the fellowship hall for that. More details on that next week.
Very cool. All right. That's right. Passover. Yep.